What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and hopefully I'll make you a better sim racer. I want to go ahead and touch on a topic I feel like doesn't get discussed as much as you'd expect in the world of sim racing, and that is racing smarter, better races. I want to go into my background thought process when I go into a race in this video, because I strongly believe that you can get better results by looking beyond, well, just go faster, duh. Because, well, yeah, that's the thing. If you just go faster, yeah, you'll do better, obviously. But running a good quality race is important too, as is the strategy within. In the background is the Weekend Warriors League race with the Formula V at Laguna Seca from this last weekend. I chose it because it was a pretty good race with a great result for myself, definitely a great result. But at the same time, it was a race that particularly emphasizes several points I want to go ahead and touch on, and it kind of dawned on me, I've had this idea for this video for a while, I've just never really had a moment, and now it's like, you know, this is like everything put together into one race. I really need to do a video on this. From my perspective, I always like to have a plan. Well, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and the best laid plans don't survive first contact with the enemy, and we all know these sayings. Having a basic idea and a basic game plan going into things is beneficial. And I really think it begins with identifying who you are as a driver. This is especially important with sim racing because, you know, everybody is so very different, and there's a wide range of skill levels from, you know, people struggling just to keep the car on the road to alternatively esports champions and all that stuff. You know, some people are hot lappers and that's what they excel at. Some people are slow boys but really super consistent. You know, some struggle to keep the car on the road but have fantastic car control. You know, do you like being in contact with another car? Do you like being at the front of the pack, or do you like chasing a car because you're better, you know, with that rabbit out there in the distance? So it really kind of is something where it's a good idea to figure out what works best for you and where you're strongest, what your strengths are, as well as that it also enables you to figure out what your weaknesses are and what you can work on. But within this context, you know, I would self-describe myself as a certified worker. You know, now that you have an idea of what you are and your strengths and your weaknesses, and you've kind of been honest about that, it's a good time to look at what you are racing. And this is one of the reasons why I picked the Formula V race, because it really particularly embodies it. And, you know, understanding what the race actually is, which is going to shape the way that you're going to race. You know, this is a 40-minute race with a mandatory pit stop in a car with a massive slipstream on a track with 4 corners that are certified passing opportunities, 3 more that are doable if you get a good run off the previous corner, and 2 or 3 more straights that can be a passing area. Right from the get-go, based off of all of that, I know I'm best to be reserved and cautious. You know, a worker is going to work, right? Passing opportunities are going to be plenty, and the type of racing means that the only thing that really matters is being there at the end with 5 to 10 minutes left in the race. The game plan is simply to not take myself out of the race by forcing moves that might break up the pack and prevent me from doing my thing, you know, working. On the flip side, in the V's here, if I were a fast guy out there, you know, hot lap guy, I might be willing to be a bit more aggressive in getting to the front of the pack, more willing to risk breaking up the pack, and the confidence that if I do, I can still chase down the car out in front by relying on my pace. Now that said, if you're not fast, if you can't rely on your pace, well then it doesn't make much sense to try and rely on your pace. Of course, on the flip side, if I go into something like a GT3 sprint race, well that sort of changes the approach, does it not? Which is partly the reason why someone like myself honestly just doesn't gravitate towards that environment, because it's a go, balls to the walls, whole race, all race, and it's just not an area that I excel in, beyond the fact that they're cars that I just don't excel in to begin with. The last thing to touch on here is we're going to talk about pit strategy a bit. There are 2 elements going on with any pit strategy or any strategy plays. There's the macro strategy, you know, the big zoomed out picture, and then there is the in the heat of the moment micro strategy. You know, sometimes due to track position or other factors, it becomes beneficial to audible, and that's really the fun with pit strategies. Now, the first thing to talk about here is there are some big advantages to be seized for most sim racers around pit stops. Simply taking the time to actually prepare for pit stops will yield an instant advantage versus many other drivers out there. Taking the time to actually do fuel calculation to fill up your car just enough will gain you time. It was actually very critical in winning this race. Spoiler alert. A smoking pit entry will gain you time, especially In oval racing, you can gain heaps of time just by nailing your pit entry versus your competition, because it can be really tricky, but if you got it down, it's a big opportunity to seize. Knowing if the tires fall off a lot, which will make a undercut early pit stop preferable, or if they are stable lap times and it doesn't really matter, therefore you can run along and do an overcut, will gain you positions. Having an idea, having a game plan is beneficial. Now when you go ahead and put that in context with the person driving the car, in my case, a driver like myself benefits from going off strategy, running a higher risk, higher reward by either going short on tires, pitting early, or attempting to go long on tires, playing off of a caution. That's why generally, if you watch my races, especially the oval races, I'm probably looking to make the tires last longer on that oval environment, to essentially create an advantage in my favor to give me the raw pace I need versus the field to be competitive. To regulate this outside of sim racing, Formula One fans will inevitably be pretty familiar with Racing Point over the previous few years and their gumption to run a goofy strategy and the hard tires that rarely anyone else wants to touch. IndyCar fans, of course, you will be familiar with what I like to call coin strats, given Dale Coin Racing's penchant for pulling something silly no one else does. It's the same type of concept that you can use yourself. You can't fight toe-to-toe, well, make an advantage. If you don't try to win the race, you will never win the race. And when you're in this position, sometimes you have to try to win the race a little bit harder than other people have to. But on the flip side, if you're the fast guy with pace in hand, well, what upside is there to playing your strategy aggressively? This is when, rather than going for a non-traditional strategy and trying to pull something out of the hat, you probably look to go with the flow of the race and pit with the pack, or make your stops solely based on the cars in front of you and behind you. For example, you F1 fans out there, you don't often see Mercedes or Red Bull actively pulling shenanigans and just going full-on silly mode out there because they really don't need to. Instead, they base their strategies almost solely upon countering one another. But wrapping this all up and keeping this one of the shortest videos in the history of this channel, that's really something. You gotta remember, racing and sim racing is not simply about driving around as fast as possible. That's actually a very simplistic point of view called qualifying. It's missing everything else that's happening within racing. Racing is actually about figuring out how to complete a certain distance, time, number of laps, what have you, as fast as you possibly can, and therefore, in the process, finish ahead of as many cars as you can. Those two things are actually kind of, sort of, a good bit different in the end of it. I mean, yeah, if you just go faster, well, yeah, you'll probably have better results. It's a lot easier to finish up the order when you're just, faster, but oftentimes, not everyone can just, turn on the switch and be an alien all of a sudden overnight. It just doesn't work that way unless you get abducted. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.